Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So it's the early preview video for Game Week 32, and even though there's quite a way before the next deadline, I do think it's important to get initial thoughts and reflections just after the previous game week has finished, and then I'll update those nearer to the next deadline. As always, this video will include the manager of the week and who is currently leading our mini league, as well as how my own team got on in Game Week 31. And spoiler alert, I am planning on potentially wildcarding, and that video will be coming out on Thursday. I'll also talk about the best captaincy options as it stands and how my current team does look for game week 32. If you are new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, liking the video. I do really appreciate all the support, and let's get into it. So shout out to Randy, who was manager of the week. Duncan did get 74 points, but took a -4, therefore taking him down to 70. And both of these guys have also been manager of the week already this season, I do believe. 72 points wasn't like a crazy score, but considering it was a blank game week and he didn't make any transfers, I think it's a pretty good turnout. Takes him into the top 1 million. Bruno Fernandes' captaincy really was the difference maker this week. I think if you captained him or Harry Wilson, you probably had an okay game week. If you took a gamble on someone like an Ekatike, you probably had a pretty bad game week. So yeah, points scored from defence, midfield, and up front, owning Danny Welbeck. What a difference maker that will have been this game week. Because it's one thing getting Bruno Fernandes points, which a lot of managers get, but can you get the points that not many other managers will get, like a Danny Welbeck? So the current leader is still Halvard. 61 points is well above the weekly average. He is being closed in on by Marco and Dom in the top three. I myself have dropped down to seventh, but Halvard is really getting quite a good lead over a lot of other managers across the mini league. So the top three is quite tight, but I think having about 17 points difference is still a nice cushion from first to second. Overall, you look at the team and you think, where did the points come from? Well, it's essentially Harry Wilson, Bruno Fernandes, and Anthony Gordon. Wilson and Gordon were really good pickups for anybody this week, and it's seen him drop out just outside the top 10k, but he's still a fantastic rank. Defensively, there wasn't too much going on. Gambled on the Newcastle defence, and it just didn't pay off. And the same thing up front. Even had Tarkowski on the bench for 6 points, and I'd be interested to know if any of you actually had any bench points this week, or whether you were struggling to get out 11 players like me. So onto my team for game week 31 and 44 points. I'm going to be honest, it's a little rough to look at. So if you're not too keen, you can skip this section if you don't want to see a bad game week. Game week rank of about 5 million is not good either. And I did drop down in rank from about 56k to about 94k, so about a 40k red arrow. Not the worst week in the world, could have been worse, especially because I only had 8 players scoring me points in the end, and I'll take you through it. So in goal, I had my second highest point scorer in Carl Darlow with 6 points. I'm glad Leeds kept that clean sheet because otherwise I really would have been struggling to crack 40 points. I think in defence, we can see here 1 point. So Tior was on the bench. I did bring him in. I did also bank on Mukiele playing, or at least, coming off the bench. He did neither. He didn't start or come off the bench. So he got 0 and actually stayed on my bench. So Nunes was a playing defender for me. And then Senesi got 1 point and no defcon. So not a lot of points to be said in the defence. In the midfield, it got a little better. Bruno Fernandes captain, and goodness me, if I didn't captain Bruno Fernandes, I would have been in a world of pain this week. 26 points from Bruno, more than half my overall score. I'm just glad I went for him, even though it was the first game of the game week, the Friday night kickoff. He got those points. Enzo nearly scored in his game, and Wenger was on the bench as well in for Brentford, so came on for 1 point. And Pedro Neto continues to disappoint me. Up front, I did have Jared Bowen, brought him in for Krupi. Krupi came off the bench and scored a penalty. I think if you'd have told me before the game week that Krupi would be on the bench for Bournemouth and come on for 17 minutes, and that's all you'd said, I still would have made the transfer because the odds of him getting a penalty in those 17 minutes and then scoring it feel like were quite slim. So overall, I was still happy with the transfer because it was only 3 points between Krupi and Bowen. and I did have transfers to give. Thiago got DEFCON, which in a game week like this makes him my third highest scoring player out of everyone. So yeah, no points from Thiago, Nunes, and Haaland gives me 8 players to be working with, and from that, only 3 players scored more than 2 points. So it was not a good game week. I knew it was potentially a risky game week to, have not a lot of players playing, but I'm also glad that I didn't play the free hit, say, or I didn't make a load of transfers because a lot of popular players didn't necessarily score points. Van Dijk, Ekitike. It's really if you had Bruno, Harry Wilson, and Anthony Gordon, you probably had a good game week. If you didn't have them, then you probably struggled. So overall, I'm still inside the top 100k. I'm planning on springing into action, and we'll discuss that in a second. So let's take a look at the captaincy odds. And, it's a long way till the next deadline. Friday, the 10th of April. I'm not going to remind you that it's a Friday deadline now. Get your team sorted, in preparation because we've got a ton of football to be played. Haaland is currently ranked as the best captain alongside Gabriel. For me, I quite like Bruno Fernandes. Last game of the game week is always nice. Man United at home to Leeds, I think will give Bruno a good chance of scoring points. So he probably will be my captain. Haaland with the vice captain. That's if my team stays as it is. I think if you've got any of these players, I probably would just go with Bruno, Man United being the home team. Chelsea's form is not good though, and we remain to see how they do in the FA Cup. But Man City at home is not an easy game, and I think Haaland can also do well. Would I captain an Arsenal player at home to Bournemouth? Probably not. I think it's between Haaland and Bruno. So moving on to my team, and this is how we're currently lining up in game week 32 with no wildcard, no free hit, no transfers currently made. I have gone for Raya in goal against Bournemouth, and we remain to see how the FA Cup quarter-finals currently work out. It's likely that he doubles in game week 33 and blanks in game week 34. So currently Darlow would be playing in game week 34. But I'm more than happy to have Raya in goal for all the fixtures for Arsenal for the rest of the season. I think defensively, they've got some really good games coming up. Into defence, and Mukiele, whilst has been awesome for me this season, I've stuck with him for the last 3 weeks, and he was on the bench in game week 31. Hopefully, he should be fully fit in game week 32. You would think that he'll be starting again, and that Spurs game at home looks really good from a defensive point of view. Elsewhere, I've got Thiaw, Nunes, and Gabriel. It was a bit of a toss up between Nunes and Senesi as to who starts. I think I probably will go with Nunes, just a bit more attacking, although I do think both Chelsea and Arsenal probably will score. So it's a bit between will Senesi get DEFCON more than Nunes gets an assist. Probably is likely to be Senesi, but I just think Nunes is playing better when I've seen him play. And then the other defenders just will start. Into midfield, and Enzo Fernandez and Pedro Neto are on massive borrowed time for my team. I've been looking to get Pedro Neto out since about game week 27, and I've still not managed it. The same with Enzo. But the thing is with Enzo, he's actually underperforming his expected goal involvements massively. He's supposed to have gotten, or is expected to have gotten, 10 goals, 6 assists. He's currently on 8 goals, 4 assists, and he is getting those chances. So he will be on the bench this week. And it's like saying, how we've said before, is it worth making a transfer for a player who's just going to be on your bench, or you're going to bench someone who you would otherwise been happy to start? I think we'll see how Chelsea go in the FA Cup. If they double in game week 33, it does make sense to hang on to them if I'm not going to wildcard because I'll have 2 players doubling already from Chelsea. Are they the best Chelsea assets? Well, other than João Pedro and Cole Palmer, who's a lot more expensive, they're probably not far off being those best Chelsea players. Elsewhere in the midfield, I have gone for Dango, Bruno, and Semenyo. Bruno as the captain, Semenyo playing really well, and hopefully Dango gets the start. If he's benched again, that's a bit of an issue. Up front, I am going with Haaland, Thiago, and Jared Bowen. All of them have reasonable fixtures. I think Haaland away at Chelsea is okay, and even if I was to wildcard, I would stick with him. Jared Bowen, I've just got in. Playing at home to Wolves, I think he's a good game. And then Thiago at home to Everton is also not bad, even though Everton seem to be doing all right at the moment. So overall, the team value is 104.4 million. I've got 0.1 million in the bank with 4 free transfers. So I do have the flexibility, but I've kind of got a few different ways that I can go with my team. And this is where I've started for the first time this season, or in the second half of the season, thinking of some sort of chip strategy for the remainder of the year. Because what I don't want is just to be left with a load of transfers, a load of chips in the last few weeks of the season, not using them at the best time possible, and just wishing that I'd done more with them when I had the opportunity. So option number one would be to wildcard in game week 32 and bench boost in game week 33, and then free hit in game week 34. And I've banged on and on about how you don't free hit in a blank game week. It's just not great. As we've just seen, right? There's not a lot of players in a blank game week who end up doing really well. You've got to be really specific and absolutely nail it in order for it to make sense. However, if I wildcard in 32, get in players, 15 players who are all going to double in game week 33, and then they'll all blank in game week 34, and then I've got those players back for the rest of the season and for free transfers to tweak it as I wanted. Now, the strengths of this plan is that I've still got multiple options and I've got a load of team values. So to wildcard now, I would keep, or the plan is to keep players like Semenyo, someone like even Bruno Fernandes, players I've got a lot of value tied up in, Gabriel, because if Man City win their FA Cup game against Liverpool, that's better for me in the sense of keeping hold of those players. If Liverpool beat Man City, then that really does create a bit of an issue in terms of the fact that I probably would need to maybe free hit in 33 to get those Liverpool players in if I didn't want them long term, and then look at wildcarding afterwards because Man City would then play in game week 34. You could hang on to the Man City players on a wildcard in 34, bench the Arsenal players, and then rearrange the rest of my team looking like that. The weaknesses is just the FA Cup because we think that Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City are all going to be winning their quarterfinals and doubling. If that doesn't happen, it kind of puts the plan into, a bit of uncertainty. And there's also the fact that I want to hang on to players for this run. It's a bit like Pedro Neto, Enzo Fernandez. If I wasn't wildcarding, I'd keep hold of them. Whereas even if I wildcard, I probably would swap out Pedro Neto and get in João Pedro up front, say. So I'd still have the Chelsea players, but it just gives me that ultimate flexibility in order to do what I want with the team. So that's my initial thoughts. As everyone else should be, I'm waiting for the FA Cup quarterfinals. Really, if Man City win, I probably will still wildcard in 32 and then just bench boost in 33 with maximum 15 players because I want to start making big moves. That would mean a free hit in 34, which I don't want to do. But there's not really another time to do it on that strategy. So I'd be interested to know what you guys think, how your game weeks have gone, and what strategies you're planning on doing, making what moves you're making moving forward, because it is different for all of us depending on our rank, number of chips, and what our team currently looks like. So, yeah, hopefully you've had a good game week, or at least better than mine, and I will see you on Thursday for the wildcard video.